if they didn't meet criteria and you just wanted to give them some Tylenol or Motrin, then that's fine. That can be BLS. That's going to be one of those judgment calls.
So then should the ALS providers write an ALS PCR?
If the ALS provider performed a medication, then that's an ALS PCR. They gave a med.
And should that ALS provider then call a doc to basically make that turnover?
Unfortunately, although I realize it'll be a pain in the butt, but for consistency, you can't say for D50 you do, or for D10 you do, for Tylenol you don't. I think we have to be consistent. You give a med, you make a phone call. I think we have to be consistent, otherwise we drive people crazy. Or we could just stop calling for the glucose as well. That's another way to be consistent.
No, I mean, I think this is the point where you're basically having an ALS provider decide that they don't need to write an medication. So that's the question that's come up. I mean, we probably need to bring this up at the Remac and decide for sure where we're going to go. Started academic a little bit early. The question has come up, Mike.
We were doing a combined meeting, weren't we?
What?
This is a combined Remac and academic. We've got the other people into it.
Well, I mean, we're doing the academic part first, I guess. And
okay.
The issue that came up and was questioned from a number of providers is, can they give Tylenol and Motrin and then basically turn the patient over to BLS and send them on their way?
Why not?
Because we're giving a medication, which we've always done in the past, and once we've done that, the ALS provider is always wrote it.
I can't think of a reason that you'd have to have a paramedic on board an ambulance if you give Tylenol and Motrin.
Okay.
But I do think we have to be consistent about the phone call. As difficult as it will be for the Remo MDs to say, yeah, I know. Like,
Okay. All right. So we have a clarification. Providers will be able to do that. They'll be able to give Tylenol and Motrin. They'll need to write a PCR, but they'll need to call a doc before they end up turning that patient over to BLS. Everybody okay with that? Okay. Seems like we have pretty much agreement. Anybody from the provider standpoint have any problems with that?
I think it should be a
Yeah,
BLS skill.
it's a BLS skill.
Yeah, this is the next progress is making it a BLS.
Yeah, exactly.
Because what's the difference between that and oral glucose?
The medicine?
The medicines.
Right, but it's an oral agent. That's within the scope of practice of an EMT. I don't.
Do the same thing with albuterol.
At the moment it's not, so.
as I understand, it's not a BLS skill yet.
Not yet.
Yeah, so until it becomes one, then we have to stipulate it.
All right.
In years to come, I'd love to see us getting phone calls about the glucose going away too, but we can't do it yet.
So, do we need to send an advisory out for that or not?
And for clarification, if you had questions, I think we ought to clarify it, right?
Okay, so then we're gonna have Tim send a clarification.
We can do this in advisory. That's probably the
Yeah,
most
advisory.
reasonable thing to do.
Okay, that basically was, there was some question of Tylenol or Motrin to BLS modality. That hasn't happened yet. Maybe next time.
I look forward to when that is a BLS modality.
I have nothing else from academic. Anybody have anything else to add to that? So we'll move on to the other combined part of the meeting, I guess.
So that was the fastest academic meeting.
We can ask you for a report.
Yes. And with Mr. Giordano, who will be speaking later about for mental health, we want to get through a couple things first to get them all done we can. So motion to approve the minutes for September.
Make that motion.
Okay. Second. Done. No correspondence, thankfully. Academic, everyone was already present for it. REMSCO, Tim presented a business plan. The good news of that is now we can answer the question of where your money is going to, because we have to separate out what the state will pay for, what the state won't pay for. So the things the state won't pay for is what we're going to use the radio fund for. CBAC.
Just some clarification on Motrin. So what was essentially voted on no antipyretics for kids under 6 weeks of age, no Motrin for kids under 6 months of age, no Motrin to pregnant people at any time in their pregnancy. And you can use a 160 per 5 Tylenol, which means you're gonna give 640 rather than 650, because we thought it was probably not reasonable to end up, if you don't have the unit doses, trying to give 10.15 milliliters didn't seem like it makes sense. Other than that, some good things from the state. There was some talk about how CME was going to change, that providers are probably going to end up recertifying, and Mary may want to comment on that, every 4 years rather than 3 years. I'm not sure.
There's an advisory posted to our website as of yesterday.
Was it there?
Yes.
Okay. And that's going to start when?
I believe January 1st is when it's set.
And it will start after your next research, is that full happen?
Nope, starting January 1st, this can be used.
So if you're supposed to research a year, then you research 2 years?
No.
Okay.
The dates will change with this cycle.
Okay, so your next cycle will be for red.
Right.
Other than that, I don't think there was much else. There were a number of protocols for New York City that were looked at but not accepted, and there was a long discussion about that. They're not the only, New York City is the only island, literally, that's not using collaborative protocols. Everybody else in the state is, and literally they are sort of an island, except I guess for Brooklyn and Queens. That's Staten Island. Not Staten Island.
We're attached.
Is there any protocol that they have that we don't?
Mike, you may want to comment on that. I think they have some differences.
You mean New York City?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just wondering if there's any big hole. I'm sure we all have minor variances, but do they have something that we just never thought about we ought to put in our collaborative set? Just want to make sure I'm not missing something.
No.
Okay.
Well, actually, Mike, they do. They have some of their trench rescue and very specific.
No. New York City has a series of specialty operation protocols that are pertinent to it, as is reasonable within a large urban area with a lot of resources and a lot of potential hazards. But the core set of their protocols, which is what Bruce is really talking about, are exactly the same, with minor differences. They like 182 milligrams of aspirin as opposed to, or 162 milligrams of aspirin as opposed to ours. You know, there's minor things. Nothing.
I don't care about that.
Right.
That was essentially discussed.
They like dopamine too.
Hence why they're not doing collaborative protocols, because they haven't caught up with everyone else.
We'll send them some new literature. We try. Okay.
You want a stone tablet. Okay. QI?
There was one other thing in the collaborative protocol discussions that we did as well, which was heat-related emergencies.
Oh, yes.
We had inadvertently made an error in the heat-related emergencies, which said transport as soon as possible. And we changed that language a little bit to allow people to cool patients appropriately in place if they had the resources to do so. So we changed the language around to make it permissive. And that was a really nice pickup by some of the folks up north.
Exactly. We have heat emergencies. So QI? Sorry. Hamburger QI. No QI. Hawk, it was canceled.
When was the last time we met?
This spring. So fortunately with the whole housekeeping, having a special presentation, we don't have a whole lot of housekeeping. Town of Catskill, RSI presentation.
I sent Tim, I don't know if you distributed.
You go get
I
that.
sent it all out yesterday, so everybody got that. Hopefully everybody received it. If not, I can review some of that, but basically, and that was the outline, which you sent both, Tim?
I sent everything you sent me yesterday, which I got.
Which outlined, where we're at in terms of training and education, what equipment we intend to use, the meds. The one thing I didn't put in there, it is a 2-medic required program, same as Green EMS, since we have the same medical director. He's requiring the same parameters to be used for that. So it would require 2 trained and credentialed medics in order to do an RSI. Anybody have questions about information that I sent out.
So I'd like to summarize what transpired. So back in the spring, Mark Foster did a long weekend advanced airway, rescue airway course for mandatory for all the Catskill paramedics. So that was the kind of the foundation. And then over the subsequent months, I met with each of the medics and we went through a series of scenarios so that they were prepped for trauma, typical medical cases, overdoses, making sure, that's probably the best way for me to pick up stumbling blocks, is to see, who feels like it's the most fluent. Doses are coming, or they know quickly how to look up the dose, the process, the regional protocol that we always have to have 2 medics, proximity to the hospital, those type of things. Gives me a chance to really see who's on shaky ground and who's not. So we did that over the summer months, and so now I think we're in pretty good shape. So we have 2 medics on 24/7 in Catskill. In the event that we need help, we've got Greene County there or Greenport who can assist, and potentially in rare occasions Albany County. So I think we've got our ducks in a row.
Will you be able to do it with a Greene County medic and a Catskill medic, or is it just Catskill?
So like what we just said with the mutual aid, so we could do like if we could borrow Greenport, we could borrow Greene County. And
Well, our protocol is just for Greenport medics on duty at Greenport.
Oh, okay.
It would require, Steve and I will have to work out a collaborative agreement on that, but that is the plan. Since we operate under the same medical director, the same set of parameters for both agencies.
So I guess my only question for you guys, if I may, Rob, my only question for you guys is, you're coming up with an RSI plan, right? And you have 2 medics on duty. So the most likely thing to me is the scenario where you're going to be doing this with a second medic from Greene County or a second medic from Albany County coming down to assist. Do you have MOUs with those guys to be able to do this effectively?
Not at this time, we're working on that.
Mike, there's always been one between Albany County and Greene County.
Right. That's why I asked the question. Because that was part of what Greene County did before they went live, was to work this out with Albany County to make sure that in these rural areas of the jurisdiction, we'd be able to make sure to get optimal care. And that there was, there were no other issues that were going to preclude that or lead to questions over whether or not this could be accomplished because something administrative had not been completed. And my suggestion would be that, certainly you guys are a long way away and you're kind of an island of not RSI capable within a whole bunch of RSI capabilities. But to bring us a plan without engaging your neighbors seems to be a little bit either premature or something which is still a work in progress. So should we approve this pending that, or should we hold this back waiting for that? Up to you.
It's gonna be 2 months until we have our next meeting, so.
Scott?
Ours was approved at Valatia with no such agreements with anybody.
But you have no partners around you that were doing such.
Greenport's an RSI agency, but they, like Greg just stated.
Mhm.
So my point is, we have 2 medics on 24/7 as well, and having some sort of an agreement to be able to snag a second medic was not part of it. So I'm not trying to discourage the MAC from encouraging that or George from pursuing that, but to my knowledge, it's never been an absolute requirement for any agency to become.
Well, given the fact you have 2 services that are basically sister agencies and one already has the agreement, it's kind of just a record keeping that why does one have a letter, the other doesn't, but it doesn't change your protocol, doesn't change really what you do.
Maybe the MAC just changed the regional protocol to make all agencies work together and do it. And then we don't need.
If you're RSI approved, you can help out another RSI.
There we go. Just a thought.
Anyone wants said motion?
I just think there's a there's no real precedent for forcing these guys to have that. I think it's a good idea to do, but I don't know if there's really a precedent for them to have it.
Yeah, I think that we should move forward with it, and their proximity to the hospital is not that far for Catskill, you know. So if they can't do the RSI, they can then come to us. It's not like Greene County being far, far out. Catskill is much closer. And we know that Greene County is going to help in the same medical director, same protocols. I think we should go ahead and approve it.
Yeah, there's a lot of cross coverage with the medics too. I mean, probably 1/4 to 1/3 of Catskill's roster is Greene County medics as well, so they have all that crossover. Correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, but I think Greene County's only had mutual aid with Albany County, I think of once in the last 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, a couple, I know we did one fairly recently.
Right,
but, doesn't happen very often.
Yeah. So I think Greene County is going to probably be the main assist for Catskill in those times where, and it's easy because I have to, you know, be the medical director for both. You know, if Greenport wants to live in their own little cloistered area, then that's. But yeah, I really foresee that, you know, Greene County is going to probably provide the bulk of the mutual aid assist should Catskill not have that second medic. But there's always 2 medics on for Catskill, which is the key to making this happen.
So if I can make a motion, we approve Catskill with the plan to develop MOUs with Greene County as well as Albany County to make sure that we can get optimal care for the patients. I think that would be good.
Second? All in favor? Any opposed? Does anyone feel strong enough to make a motion about RSI agencies supporting each other, or table that for some other time? Table.
My only concern about that discussion is if one, in this case, they're almost they're identical, so it's really easy. But if you do have 2 that are side by side but function in very different ways, they're medical directors, that we shouldn't have a blanket open. There should be more discussion about.
Especially not
That
today.
doesn't apply to you guys at all.
Particularly not because we've got Steve here.
That's what I mean, yes. That's a slippery slope to it. No BLSR, PCRs, nothing else for that. Public access, New York State Justice Centers, Schenectady and Delmar. Town of Catskill, already done. Transporting patients with blood. So.
Table it.
Yeah.
Thanks for the announcement.
Basically, do it, and you might get your wrist slapped, but just do it.
Just an announcement, I just this week, St. Peter's Health Partners signed allowing interfacility transport, allowing blood, so no nurse has to go. The training has not yet been rolled out to nursing, but that was a giant impasse that we've been working on for 2 years that has now been put to the side, so we can actually, you'll be seeing paramedics moving patients with blood between hospitals.
And that's if you use
without a nurse.
Empire.
And that's just Empire for House, they're the only one who's
Yes.
certified. If someone else becomes certified, then.
Discussion on blood?
Just the brief one, there is supposedly a complete new plan for approving agencies for carrying blood. I requested a copy of it, have not gotten it yet. So as soon as that is available, we'll get it out to everybody.
ET3?
On ongoing project, we actually have 3 motions.
That you can.
If I can
Start working through.
read into the record. Don't type these, Revell, cut and paste.
I got it.
Okay.
I got it.
All right. The first is that I ask for a Remac endorsement for alternative destinations for EMS patients, EMS transported patients, as long as they are as online physician direction. This is to take patients to alternative destinations that have been approved by the Remac. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Thank you, Bruce.
Any discussion?
What are these alternative destinations that
We would have to approve said alternative
so we
destinations.
approve them as they come up?
Yes, we're coming up with criteria. We've got the, so basically.
That's
it will
motion
be-
2. I put them in the wrong order.
Yes.
Why didn't you correct me?
Yes, there.
Online physician direction by a Remac physician or by any physician, because that's gonna become an issue, right?
Stand by.
Shut up.
It's in there too.
Can someone follow the script?
Well, no, clearly I miswrote this.
So basically, we are coming with criteria. It will end up being Multimed and Clifton Park as the 24-hour options, and then it looks like it's going to be, this is St. Peter's, Well Now, All We Met Emergent Cares, and my one little dinky place will be the regular urgent cares. And then once we have that up, it'll open up to others, but that group, which represents about 95% of the urgent cares, have all agreed so far to participate.
If it's straight ortho, would you consider ortho urgent care or the cardiology urgent cares?
Yes, but we're defining
No.
the ortho.
Ortho, yes.
But
Cardiology,
No.
yeah.
No, tell me how you really feel.
But basically, we're defining your urgent care. You agree to participate, and then we're going to have the one or two ones kind of opt in after that. All in favor? Any
Put in
opposed?
two hands because I'm two people. Sam
All right.
Vasco is my left hand, my right hand is Michael.
Well, Frank's here. Can you be Sam too?
Okay.
I would've straightened your
No,
arms.
Not one Sam.
He's going to be Frank.
He's gonna be-
Motion number 2, the REMO Executive Director, Remac Chair, and Regional Medical Director will develop baseline standards for participating alternative destinations, including, but not limited to, participation in regional QA activities for all EMS patients, notification the next business day for all patients transported to the facility by EMS that were then transported out of that facility by an ambulance for CQI review, and an agreement to see and treat all EMS transported patients regardless of insurance status.
Discussion on that one?
Wait a second, first we discuss.
Has the
Seconds.
private insurance, the private well now, have they accepted that?
So where we are with the ET3 program itself, the ET3 program itself is just looking for memorandums or letters of support. The letters of support are just saying, listen, we think this idea of alternative destination is a good one. We still have to figure out how to, put those pieces in place and then talk to them about exactly what it's going to mean. This is providing a structure behind what sort of discussions we're going to have. Because we're going to have a physician involved in the decision-making to get the person to the facility, they should already have insurance if they're going to go. So our goal is to make sure the patients that are going to these facilities can pay the facilities. But if we swing and miss, and we bring a patient to a facility, they can't then do an immediate wallet biopsy, throw the person out and call us back.
Well, just because we named them as one of the places they would go.
They're
In the last
people-
motion, I wanted to make sure they were on board with that as well.
Well, they weren't named in the motion, they were just named in the discussion.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we are in discussion with them, and so far they're in support of the idea. We haven't got any contracts or anything like that.
Yeah, the big question with all of this is, okay, all these things seem to be falling in place for it to work, and it's conceptually a really good idea. Can we actually pull it off? I hope so. I hope so.
Okay. Did we get the second?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, motion approved. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, that passes.
Motion number 3. The REMO Executive Director, Remac Chair, and Regional Medical Director will develop baseline standards for credentialing participating telemedicine provider companies, including but not limited to participation in regional QA for all EMS patients, and developing a self-sustaining fiscal model to support regional QA to assure the safety of the program.
Can you develop that a little bit more? What are your early, I realize it's early in your thoughts, but what are your thoughts on how this is going to get paid for?
That's going to be part of the developing the process. There's a bunch of different ideas in terms of where the money should come from. It's probably premature to discuss exactly where that should come from right now.
I agree in concept, I just don't know how you're going to pull it off.
I don't either. But I do know that we need to make sure that if we develop we can't do this without a good, robust quality assurance program. We can't do this without having somebody that's not engaged in the process doing that oversight. And we absolutely need to make sure that this is a self-sustaining model. for fiscal stability. So we have to figure that part out yet, but I need to just develop some ideas behind it and get us started. And if you'd like to help develop that, that'd be great. I'd love to know. Well, if the motion passes. That doesn't mean you should vote it down so you don't have to participate.
You'll be voluntold either way.
We'll leave my involvement out of it. Right now, we'll just stick with the motion.
Have a second?
Stephanie, I got a second.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I already said the first, so somebody should really do the third.
Bosco.
Okay. He should actually be here.
So a second. Okay, pass it seconding. All in favor? Any opposed?
Thank you.
And that concludes in 25 minutes.
Wait a second, there's more to it.
Oh, you're really.
No, wait.
Facility 911.
Oh, yeah, that was that different motion, not these three.
You can make this one.
No, it's.
No, you should make this one.
No,
You should make this one.
Well, let Rob make.
I can't make it.
What?
Chair can't make a motion.
Of course you can.
Especially not in this one.
Oh, okay. Making the motion that a interfacility critical patient be considered the equivalent of a 911 patient, and the ability to use 911 if necessary to make sure that that patient can move in an expedient manner, and anywhere else where that information would be useful.
Second. Okay. Discussion?
Is this for protocol purposes?
Regional purposes. Just regional support purposes.
We currently have an arrangement at
In
CMH.
CMH, it's working very nicely, and this is
When-
basically modeled off that.
So, I'm not intentionally throwing any stones or bombs here, but when it is used appropriately, it works perfectly. We just had one, I don't know, Anand, when was that? Where'd you go? A couple weeks ago?
Yeah, I was,
Now granted, I mean, we call them up, we communicate with Jeff, it's all worked out, it's not a big deal, and it's not, I just think that if there's gonna be some guidance from the MAC on this to the facilities or whatever or to the agencies, that the facilities get some guidance. Because currently with CMH, it's strokes, bleeds and MIs only. So it's not just for any patient out of the unit.
I think you hit the nail on the head with what bothers me in the back of my head is selection criteria is critical. There's sometimes it's better to keep a very sick patient in the ED and wait for a specialty critical care transport team to come. And there's other times when that critical care transport team really isn't gonna offer anything else, and then it's better to put them in the fastest ambulance. So from a physician education viewpoint, I think each of us in the individual emergency departments are gonna have to educate our physicians who are making those calls.
What we're using at Columbia is we're using it for three purposes now. Number one is for someone who needs a cardiac cath, who's having a STEMI, who walks in the door. Someone who needs interventional neurosurgery for a clot, thrombectomy. Okay? And now we're no longer OB for certain OB cases. Those are the three things we use it for. So.
Good selection.
Yeah, and we talk about it, and yes, there was a mix-up with a phone call. There were two there was a STEMI and another critical patient as well, and the unit secretary, who was a tech covering for unit secretary, made a mistake.
So, I mean, it works well down there because it's a single hospital in a county that has a county system.
That we meet regularly.
And right, there's regular meetings, and there's only a few agencies that make up that county system. It works pretty well. If you're gonna ask another hospital in another county to pick up the phone and call 911 for another facility transport, you may get some agencies pushing back on that stuff, especially as it, not intentionally misused, but as it gets misused and it starts getting used for other things. Yeah, so admittedly, it does work really well down at Columbia County.
Yeah, I think it's gonna require a lot of legwork on the individual facilities with their surrounding agencies.
Because you don't want it to backfire too and have agencies start pushing back and saying, well, we're not coming, I don't care if you call it a 911 call or not. if it gets misused too many times,
Yeah.
they're gonna push back.
And we're happy to help with any agency or hospital that wants to work with it. We can talk with how we developed it. And it's been a work in progress for 4 years, I think we've been doing it for.
Yeah, it started from the Amsterdam model, and it's been working successfully
Yeah.
for you guys most of the time, and in
Yeah.
Amsterdam most of the time. And
Yeah.
you know, frankly, it's a reasonably good model. It's not something that I anticipate being used very often. It's something that I see being extremely useful in a number of different municipal discussions. There's a whole lot of different background behind it, but the language itself, coming from this body to be able to support those things, will be very, very helpful.
And I
So,
agree.
thank you.
Talking about a robust QA process with a lot of stuff we're talking about today, and there is a good one there. It's an open communication with the doctors and the agencies. If there's an issue, we review them and say, here's what.
Real time.
Real time, yeah. Sometimes.
Phone calls at 3 in the morning.
Yeah. So that works very well, and that needs to be a big piece of it from our experience.
And I think that one of the places this may affect might be in Albany, as Memorial has less and less services available.
There are many different places right now we have that are being impacted by that, but yes.
Yeah.
Any other discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, that one carries. And now, sorry, half hour into it. Sir? You're all set.
So we brought Steve along. He is the Director of Mental Health for Albany County, because I thought we would be really well served by having a conversation around mental health law, what our requirements are, what the rules say, what's happening in terms of mental health resources. Steve asked me this morning in an email whether you should wear a bulletproof vest. I said no, that when you come in the door here. He wore it anyway, he's not, he's a smart guy. You know, I told him that there would be cookies and good collegial conversation, because we're all in this together, and we're all trying to do the right thing. So, if you want to just
Sure.
a little background.
I'm pleased to join you. I am the mental health commissioner of Albany County. There is one of me in every county in the state, 57 of us, not including New York State. This is a capital region group, so is that correct? So there is a director of community services in each of your counties, and you probably know who they are because they sign pickup orders and emergency admissions often for hospitalization. I guess I could start out just by sharing my sense of where we're at as a system right now, and am interested to know how we might collaborate more, or how I can help you. In a nutshell, there are too many mentally ill people and not enough resources. And we experience this on a day-to-day basis, and although my job, I'm a psychologist by training, I'm a reluctant politician. I work for the local county government, and that shapes and shades a lot of what we do on a daily basis. But I advocate as much as I can and wherever I can for our system of care. And I will tell you this, the system is under great strain. I think what we're seeing, what you're seeing, I imagine on a day-to-day basis, is symptomatic of a multi-decade trend, and I have two minds about that trend. The trend was deinstitutionalization. It started in the 1960s or late 50s. But I think I can sign on, and hopefully you can also, that the idea that people languish in institutions is something that we should not support. But the promise of deinstitutionalization was that money would follow into the communities to support people who are otherwise languishing in hospitals, and allow them to find their path in the community. I've been doing this for 30 plus years, and I haven't seen the promise fulfilled over the course of those years, and I think what we're seeing lately is getting worse. And again, what you see on a day-to-day basis with mentally ill and addicted patients is, I think, symptomatic of that strain. So it serves no purpose to blame, but I will say that although throwing money at things is not the answer, we're severely underfunded in our system. And we have a governor who, you know, sure, he's a great guy and does a lot of good things, but with regard to the mentally ill and the addicted folks, our state facilities have been shrinking for years. And again, you know, in Albany County, for the 13 county, I think, or 9 county catchment area, CDPC is our state psychiatric hospital. That resource has been shrinking in terms of availability of beds for as long as I've been working. That results on almost regular basis of their crisis unit, which many of you, if not all of you, have bumped into, goes on diversionary status, which basically means they can't take any more patients, which is just incredible. We frequently hear from patients and family members who correctly say, how could you have let my loved one sit in the crisis unit for 7 days before a disposition was made? Well, that happens. And it happens because there's no hospital beds in CDPC. And when they go on diversion, Albany Medical Center, as an example, although infrequently, they also have gone on what they're calling diversion. I didn't even know you could do this until I got a call at 2 in the morning from the Albany Police Department asking me, we just got turned away from the Albany Medical Center emergency room. It happens infrequently for short durations of time, but I think the flow of mentally ill patients is so regular that any time that happens, it impacts what ultimately is patient care for that individual. I've talked to Dr. Daly many times and his colleagues at Albany Medical Center. I've talked to Dr. Vendetti about the challenges in the emergency room. You guys, you know, at any given time or point in time, you can have 20, 30 or more psychiatric patients in the Albany Med Emergency Room. So what's the answer? I think the push is to try to pressure community resources to replace what otherwise would have been long-term psychiatric care in a hospital. And I'm all for having people in the community with appropriate resources try to recover. I think we see on a day-to-day basis that fails as much as it succeeds. So I share, if I'm assuming that, just with the police chief and in Albany and the county sheriff in Albany talking about how a large percentage of their work on a daily basis involves mentally ill and addicted people, I'd imagine that is shared with your experience. So better that we're talking than not. I welcome this opportunity, and I didn't even know you guys met like this. It's kind of like walking down the hall of my office and walking in on a conversation. It's like that. I've learned a couple of things already today about Motrin and Tylenol and wallet biopsies. That's a great term, but I'd like to be of help to you and have a dialogue. As you know, maybe this can be. I certainly am not going to solve your problems today, but I think we are all in it together, as Dr. Daly said, and so maybe we could share the burden a bit. I'd be glad to talk about any pressing concerns or issues that you might want to bring up or ask me about. There's a lot of legal stuff involved, I know.
Questions or comments?
Steve, maybe if you get us started with a discussion of the 941 patient.
Yes.
And where they can or can't go based on county lines, because that's one that comes up with some frequency.
Yeah, for me too. Well, I'll tell you that there is increasing gray areas that many of us are left on a day-to-day basis to just ask, you know, what's best for the patient and act accordingly. The mental hygiene law that talks about, that tries to answer the question you just asked, is dated, and a lot of room for interpretation. But more importantly, using St. Peter's Health Partners as an example, county boundaries are blurred more and more because of expanding regional approaches to care. So, as an example, we can have a patient in Albany picked up by the Albany police, transported by Mohawk ambulance to the Albany Medical Center to get medically cleared. Then they go to the crisis unit to determine whether they needed admission. And it turns out the only bed available is in Saratoga or in Troy. Or now I'm hearing from St. Peter's that they actually want to keep more efficiently and expeditiously treat patients that show up in their ED. So if they have someone who comes in with a psych issue, they don't even want to send them to the crisis unit anymore. They'd like to be able to admit them directly to Samaritan. And that gets into this question of county commissioners and who'll sign off on what, and what the county lines really mean. I've always, there are about 40 or 45 people on my list of Director of Community Service designees who can act on my behalf to either, if they're physicians, examine a patient as part of a 2PC or an emergency admission, or non-physicians who can initiate pickup orders. It's been our practice, and it still is my preference, to address each county patient population within that county. So the doctors and the psychologists and the social workers who are on my list to do either 2PCs or emergency admissions or pickup orders, they are designated to work within the county limits. But once we, as I say, once I sign off on something, what the patient needs often trumps what happens. So a patient that I thought was going to an Albany hospital or resource ends up in one of our surrounding counties. I'm not sure if that's legal, quite frankly. I know that if the Rensselaer County Commissioner said to me, well, I'm authorizing my physicians to admit people in your hospital, I would object to that. We've had some police departments who say, we don't, you can do anything you want, but we don't go across. The sheriff has said times, we don't transport to whatever county you want. We'll work within Albany County. So I'd be interested to know how it presents as a challenge or a problem on the ground for you guys, and how often you do cross jurisdictional lines.
I think that the biggest problem for EMS providers is we pick up subject A in Albany County, and they have a history with Rensselaer County, Saratoga County, and they're like, well, I'm a patient over there, I just happen to end up over here, and then you tell them, well, you're coming over, and they're like, well, wait a minute, you're not picking them up in our county, they belong over there, we want you to go to that county first, and we get
And recently we've seen more, at least I've heard more, you may see more, people who have done advanced directives on their mental health care, and they'll actually have paperwork that says, I'm going to the hospital where I was last treated, or where my doctor is, or it may not be in the county where they're found. I had always thought that irrespective of where you were found, you were going to the local 937 receiving hospital. 939 receiving hospital, I'm sorry. Numbers get confusing. Each county has one. Albany Med is Albany County, but it's a very unique hybrid case, I think, unlike any in the state, because the 939 responsibilities are shared with CDPC in the CDPC crisis unit. So really, CDPC is the receiving end, but they don't do medical clearance.
They have to go to the hospital.
They have to go to the hospital. So we've heard of crazy cases where people will come in intoxicated. CDPC will remind that they have to go to Albany Med. Albany Med will clear. The shifts change. People walk out of the Albany Med ED when they should have been going back to CDPC because they were suicidal to begin with. They're across the parking lot, but it still makes for a messy coordination. In the best of, so, those are the outliers. We have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of mentally ill and addicted patients in Albany County that are routinely in treatment in our outpatient care, in our hospitals, and in our clinics. So the volume is great, and any given day, I only hear about the cases that go bad, unfortunately. I long to hear about cases that work out well, but they don't come to me. So whether that's, the instance of where someone gets lost in the shuffle, I don't think that's representative of the care that's given, but it happens. But in 941, when I sign, so the 941 is technically what the police can do. So they can, on their own observation, each department is different on this, but they can make a determination that someone is likely to do harm to themselves or others without a psychiatric examination. They can transport on their own. In Albany, we work so closely with our mobile crisis team that oftentimes the call, even if police are there and they know that they can transport, they'll bring us in and we can cooperate with that. But my understanding has always been that it was limited to county boundaries from a legal standpoint. What happens in terms of what the patient actually needs, though, trumps that, and people end up going all over the region.
Well, under an emergent 941.
Yeah.
Right, under an emergent 941, that's being done by a police officer. He's not being, or he or she is not being empowered by you. They're empowered by the fact that they are a police
Correct.
officer.
Correct.
They're acting under state mental health law.
Correct.
Therefore, they shouldn't be restricted by county boundaries as long as they take that patient to a 939 receiving facility, right? Right.
They shouldn't be.
Now we're getting into the area that I wanted the lawyer here for.
They shouldn't be. But I will tell you that it does end up. I have had pushback at times from agencies that say, we don't go across the river, we don't go up north, we don't go. They're serving, Menands PD is not going to Saratoga necessarily, or Green Cape.
No, but they do go to Rensselaer County, and sometimes we get that pushback, well, it's, when you get to the hospital, wait a minute, this person came from Albany County?
Right.
Why are you bringing him to Rensselaer
Right.
County?
Well, so the other part of this is that there are natural pathways of care that have developed almost like a well-worn path through the woods. Again, it's irrespective of boundaries and law. People from Waterville, Menands are going to Troy, and people from the western part of Albany County are going to Ellis, and the northern part of Saratoga, and that's what's happening because it's as I say, natural pathways. The hospitals, I think, listen, I was just talking to my counterpart in Rensselaer County, and they've asked me to authorize all of the emergency room doctors, physicians in the St. Peter's Health Partners system, which right away makes me nervous, because I don't know who these people are, but they're saying that this will allow someone that arrives at the St. Peter's ED with a behavioral health problem to be admitted at Samaritan. And they'll I guess arrange for transfer. I don't know how they would do that, but in that case, the agreement's already been made by the receiving hospital. We'll take whoever you send. The problem that I have is that there's a lot of emergency room physicians, and I don't know, who they are and what criteria they may be using, but they want to take people out of the Albany system. Albany patients, they've told me they'd rather not have them go to CDPC and wait 4 days to then get booted over to Albany Med and maybe get admitted. They want to take them and send them right over.
Let me jump in here a little bit because.
What's that?
I work at St. Peter's.
Yeah.
And our main problem is we can't get people to CDPC because CDPC is on diversion most of the time.
Yeah.
Albany Med won't accept the patient, so now we have a mental health patient, and our only resource is to go to Ellis or the Samaritans, and Samaritan's part of it. So it's not that we're trying to remove them from the county, there is no space for them.
Yeah, no,
And we can't keep them for 3 or 4 days in RED waiting for a mental health exam. So that's where our issue is. I know, Frank, if you want to jump in there.
Yeah, well, actually, the transfer, the direct admit to Samaritans after a crisis evaluation. So we don't have crisis in our ER, but we're going to. And it might even involve telemedicine with a psychiatrist.
You're in St. Peter's?
At St. Peter's, yeah, or certainly a call by by social work, okay, to the psychiatrist. And then they say, yeah, the patient needs to be admitted. But the other benefit of it is, in those cases where we're not really that sure, a lot of people, seasoned ER physicians, who are used to working in a place that doesn't have psych, many of us are able to say, I don't feel this person's suicidal, I'm able to discharge him. But these are the cases where we're not really sure, and sometimes, if there's input from social work and psychiatry, we can discharge them. So there's a benefit there. And, you know, I'll be honest with you, as far as the designee part goes, I submitted my paperwork for designee, it wasn't signed off on, but.
In what county?
Albany.
Yes.
I think it's Albany. I don't know if it's Albany or Rensselaer, I'm not sure.
Well.
But anyway,
I should know my audience better, and I didn't mean to diminish the role of the St. Peter's ED doctors at all. Apparently you are one.
I've been practicing for 23 plus years as an attending, started at St. Peter's. We have never had crisis in our emergency department, despite having a detox unit.
Well, the issue right now is that the people that I designate are acting on my behalf in numerous situations, and I'm more comfortable designating people that I know than those that I don't. But I've been talking to St. Peter's administration, and they are making a case for this, and I'm being swayed in that direction, and you know, I have no doubt that you know, you're skilled in making those decisions. I just don't know who you guys are.
So basically what you're doing, Steve?
When you get sued, I get sued too, because I've designated you. So we need to make that smoother, and I think I have a list of like 35 doctors that I've been asked to approve.
That's precedent. All the LCR docs are designated by Schenectady County.
ED?
But interestingly, at Albany Med, we're not.
No.
Right?
Never have been.
But we basically do a 939 conversion when we send those people and say that they do not have the capacity to make the decisions for themselves, and send them against their will over to CDPC, right? This is a 941 to get them to me. I then technically have to make them into a 939 in order to send them to CDPC, right? Is that something that we're actually, are we treading in unclear waters there?
Well, this is an attorney question. You know that the whole relationship between CDPC and Albany Medical Center around psychiatric crises has been scrutinized at the highest levels for its ultimate legality. So I would be remiss to say I know the answer to your question. You know, the medical clearance that you guys do, you're really asking the question, under what authority can you then send them over to CDPC? Yeah.
Pretty much. I mean,
you could do it, well.
To me, it actually looks like, you know, anybody could do a 939. But when you designate members of the community, do the physicians actually have to have that designation or not? And if you guys are, and we're not, where's this precedent line?
This might be a good topic for like a work group to kind of flesh out. Because if there was, you're talking about regional agreements as I hear you discuss other matters, maybe this is one that we tackle from a regional standpoint and have a standard across counties. You're correct in saying we've never had our ED docs in Albany County designated. But for example, with a 2PC, a 2-physician certificate, just have to be a physician. They don't have to be on my list. Most of the time, the list that I authorize is for transfers, which I think is like, maybe it's a 957 hospital-to-hospital transfer. That might be one of the ways to look at this. I'm not sure how the paperwork goes. I think that's the way that's the way St. Peter's used to transfer people, hospital-to-hospital transfers. I mean, ultimately, I don't want to be in the way of giving people the care they need. I just think that every county is burdened, and I've heard as well my counterparts in other counties say, don't send them to us. The Rensselaer County Commissioner is often telling me how many people that they serve over there that are Albany County people, as if it's my fault. You know, people go, they get the care that they need when they need it, where they need it. But I will tell you that on a daily basis, the Albany County crisis in the crisis unit, it leaves me worried on a daily basis. There's just problems waiting to happen. And I brought it to the state, and I've put together some folks who have looked at other options, like more hospital beds in our area. You know, I don't know if that would be the answer, but it would certainly help. But I would like to sit down with an attorney and with maybe some ED docs to kind of flesh this out. Let's figure it out and let's get it right. Most of the people that I put on my list in the community are to do pickup orders. And those are pickup orders that will allow someone who has not been seen in necessarily even by a physician to be brought for examination. I'd be quite willing to work with you on that if you want to try to come up with something.
Thank you.
Doesn't solve your problem.
Well, you started by very clearly delineating the problem, which we all share.
Yeah. Well, it is shared and it's larger than us, and I suspect that it's actually in New York is a microcosm of what we're seeing across the country, although I'm told that our system is more robust and more resources than many states around the country. Yes. That frightens me because I know how much we need. And I've talked to some of my counterparts around the state who will tell me that, oh yeah, we don't have a psychiatrist in our county. Okay, you know, I don't even know how to relate to that. But nevertheless, we're a service-rich county, and we don't have nearly, we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg of the need. So I'd be glad to come back and work on some details.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on this? Any other discussion or new business?
Can I just ask a question of the group? So a completely unrelated topic. As most of you know, that Columbia no longer does deliveries as of yesterday. What are agencies using for transportation of neonates or kids that are less than 6 weeks? Are they using a certain car seat? Are they using a wrap? We're getting a lot of different ideas on how to, when we have an imminent delivery, to get the child to Albany or to another hospital. And different agencies are giving us different what they're suggesting, and the Department of Health in Columbia County gave a little pushback, so I'm just trying to get some help on that, if anyone's run across this at all. So you get called for like a 5-day-old. How are you transporting them to the hospital? Are you using something special to hold them?
DMT is pretty clear, it's gotta be a car seat. I don't think there's any wiggle room there at all.
Well, there's a wrap.
There's also a strap onto the stretcher that's sized for small. I think it goes down to like 4 kilos, but
So,
neonate
4 pounds.
There are
4 pounds.
there are a bunch of different products out there.
Yeah.
There's a car bed that is allowed for neonates, which is not a particularly robust thing, but it is allowed and can be secured in the vehicle. There is something called the ACR4, which is one of the more robust systems of transporting kids. There's something called a PD-Mate, which is another one. There are a number of different kinds of car seats that can be secured in ambulances. Most of those car seats are not neonate compatible if they can be secured in an ambulance. So there's a lot of different things here. We can put you in touch with some of the right people to talk to.
So we've been looking at these wraps. It's almost like a papoose that you wear. Yeah, you got it right here, the Aegis. but then we're hearing from certain people that isn't okay, but there's like 20 agencies around the country that are using it. So I didn't know if Remo or the Remac had a position on this at all that we could bring it, because Columbia County Department of Health has decided to jump in and start swaying certain squads.
We've spent an awful lot of time working on this at the hospital already. So let's take some time and use some of that.
Thank you.
Any other discussion, new business? Okay. Motion to adjourn? Yeah, Mike?
George and Craig, can I